Keanu Reeves made his entrance on the Ellen DeGeneres show. Keanu, ever the humble star, walked to the center of the stage with his usual calm demeanor, wearing a simple black hoodie and jeans. The crowd cheered louder, not just because of his fame but because of the genuine warmth he exudes. Ellen, standing behind her desk, greeted him with a big smile and in open arms. "Keanu! Welcome back! It's so great to have you here," Ellen said as she gave him a warm hug. The audience continued to clap, clearly thrilled by his presence. Ellen and Keanu exchanged a few light-hearted words, with Ellen joking about how he always managed to stay so grounded despite his decades-long career as one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. Keanu smiled, his usual humble self, and responded, "Thanks for having me, Ellen. Always a pleasure to be here." As they sat down, the conversation began with casual banter, but both Keanu and Ellen knew that they had a much deeper, more meaningful conversation waiting to unfold. Ellen began the interview with her signature humor, teasing Keanu about his calm and quiet persona. "Keanu," she said with a mischievous grin, "you're always so composed, always so zen. Do you ever have a moment where you just lose it, like throw a tantrum or something?" Keanu chuckled softly, a light twinkle in his eye. "I try not to. Life's a bit too short for tantrums," he replied, his voice steady and calm. "But I think everyone has those moments where things get a little overwhelming, don't they?" Ellen laughed along. "Okay, so no tantrums, but what about a secret hobby? Do you have one? Like knitting or something intense like underwater basket weaving?" Keanu leaned back in his chair, the smile on his face relaxed but genuine. "Well, I don't knit, but I do enjoy reading and meditating. Sometimes I think we all need to slow down and just be present." The audience laughed, clearly enjoying the playful tone of the conversation. Ellen leaned forward, intrigued. "Reading? You're a deep guy, Keanu. I love that. What's the most interesting book you've read recently?" Keanu smiled, clearly enjoying the casual exchange. "I've been reading a lot about philosophy lately. A little bit of Eastern philosophy, some existential thoughts here and there. Helps me keep my mind clear." Ellen raised an eyebrow, genuinely curious. "Well, that's definitely different from knitting," she teased. "Maybe we need to do a deep dive into your Zen life, Keanu. But seriously, it's always nice to hear how grounded you are." The crowd applauded, appreciating the light-hearted tone and Keanu's natural humility. But beneath the jokes, Ellen's curiosity about the real Keanu Reeves, the one behind the fame, was beginning to surface. As the conversation shifted, Ellen grew more reflective and asked Keanu a question that had been on her mind for a while. "Keanu, you've been in the business for so long, and yet you've always stayed so humble and grounded. What's your secret? How do you maintain that balance, especially with all the attention and fame that comes with your career?" Keanu paused for a moment, his gaze softening as he looked down at his hands, considering the question. "I think it's important to remember what truly matters," he said slowly, his voice thoughtful. "Fame, wealth, they come and go. What stays with you are the connections you make with others, the relationships you build, and the way you treat people along the way." Ellen, always keen to dive deeper, asked, "So, when you look back at your career and everything you've accomplished, how do you feel about it? Is there a moment or a movie you feel most connected to?" Keanu smiled warmly. "It's not just about the films for me. It's the experiences I've had along the way. It's the people I've worked with, the things I've learned. Each project is a new chapter, and every one of them has contributed to who I am today." Ellen nodded, clearly impressed by Keanu's perspective. "That's so beautiful. You know, it's rare to hear someone in your position talk like that. It's like you're not caught up in the whirlwind of it all. It's refreshing." Keanu chuckled softly. "I try not to get too lost in the noise. The world can be loud enough without adding to it, don't you think?" The audience, captivated by Keanu's calm and introspective nature, nodded along in agreement. Ellen smiled, sensing that this was a rare opportunity to dig deeper into Keanu's character. "You know, Keanu," she said, her tone shifting to something more sincere, "you've gone through some pretty difficult times in your life. And yet you always seem to come out with such grace. Can you share a little about how you've managed to handle it all? Keanu's expression softened even further, and for a moment, there was a quiet pause before he spoke. As Ellen's question hung in the air, Keanu took a deep breath, his expression becoming more introspective. He looked out at the audience for a moment, perhaps collecting his thoughts before sharing something deeply personal. The audience, sensing the shift in tone, grew quiet in anticipation. I've had my share of struggles, Keanu began slowly, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. Loss, grief, there are things in life that you can't control, no matter how much you wish you could. Ellen leaned in, her curiosity evident but respectful of the gravity of the conversation. I know you've experienced some really tough times, Keanu. You've lost people you love deeply, and I can only imagine how hard that must have been. Keanu nodded, his gaze never leaving the floor for a moment as he spoke. Losing someone close to you, it changes you. You don't just grieve for what you've lost, you grieve for what you didn't get to experience with them. And you start to realize how precious time really is. Ellen, her voice soft and empathetic, asked, how do you keep moving forward through all that? Keanu looked up at her, his eyes reflecting both the wisdom of his experiences and the pain he'd carried. It's not easy, he said with a quiet honesty. But I think you keep going because that's what life is. It's messy, it's hard, but it's also beautiful. And sometimes you find strength in the places you least expect. You find it in the people around you, the kindness of others, and in the small moments that remind you of the good in the world. The audience was silent, hanging on every word Keanu spoke. His vulnerability was raw, but it was also a reflection of the quiet resilience he had built over the years. The energy in the room shifted. What began as an interview was now something far more intimate, as Keanu opened his heart in a way few had ever seen. Ellen, moved by his honesty, took a moment to collect herself. Keanu, I have to say, there's something incredibly powerful about the way you speak about your pain. It's a reminder for all of us that even in the toughest times, there's always room for growth. Keanu gave a small smile, the words he'd shared weighing heavily on him but also offering a sense of relief. We all have our stories. And we all have our ways of dealing with them. I think we're all just trying to find our way through it. The audience, deeply touched, erupted in quiet applause. Keanu's message had hit home for many, reminding them that healing wasn't about forgetting the pain, but learning to live with it in a way that made room for hope. Ellen, visibly moved by Keanu's openness, took a deep breath before responding. She wiped a tear from the corner of her eye, trying to maintain her composure, but it was clear that Keanu's words had affected her deeply. You know, Keanu, Ellen began, her voice a bit shaky. It's one thing to hear someone talk about their struggles, but it's another thing to see someone who has truly faced loss and come out of it with such grace. Your words, your perspective, it's rare. It's inspiring. Keanu smiled gently, but there was no hint of arrogance in his expression, just a deep, quiet acknowledgement of the truth in her words. It's not about being perfect, he said. It's about getting back up when life knocks you down, even if it takes time. I think we all need that reminder, myself included. Ellen nodded, her eyes welling up as she reflected on her own experiences. I think that's something we all struggle with, Keanu. We get knocked down, and it's hard to get back up. But hearing you talk about it, it makes me believe that we can. That there's still hope. The emotional weight in the room grew even more intense as Keanu's vulnerability sparked something in the audience. There was a collective sense of admiration for his ability to speak so openly about his grief and the way he had found peace through it. His message wasn't just a lesson about moving forward. It was about embracing the difficult parts of life and allowing them to shape you in a meaningful way. Ellen paused for a moment, composing herself, before she looked at Keanu again, a genuine smile breaking through her tearful expression. Keanu, I have to say, this interview isn't what I was expecting, she said, her voice filled with both gratitude and awe. But it's exactly what I needed. I know it's what a lot of people in the audience needed too. Keanu nodded, his eyes soft but full of sincerity. Sometimes we just need a reminder that we're all in this together, he said. We're all facing something, but we don't have to do it alone. The room fell silent as Keanu's words lingered in the air. The audience, who had come expecting a light-hearted conversation, was now deeply moved by the vulnerability and wisdom Keanu had shared. There was no applause, no laughter, just a profound sense of reflection as everyone absorbed the weight of what had been said. Some members of the audience wiped their eyes, others sat still, deep in thought. It was clear that Keanu's message had touched a chord, not just because of the pain he had experienced, but because of the way he had turned that pain into something powerful, something that resonated with all of them. It was as though Keanu had invited them to pause and take stock of their own lives, their own struggles, and their own resilience. Ellen sat quietly, her face filled with emotion as she looked out at the audience. She had expected an entertaining, fun interview with a beloved celebrity, but what had unfolded was something far more profound. She glanced back at Keanu, her voice shaky as she spoke again. "I think we all need to hear that," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of the moment. "You've just reminded us that it's okay to not be okay sometimes, and that's really powerful." Keanu, ever humble, smiled gently, as if he had simply shared what he believed to be the truth. "We all have our moments. It's part of being human," he replied quietly. "And sometimes, we just need to acknowledge the tough stuff to be able to move forward." The audience nodded in unison, visibly moved by Keanu's calm demeanor and the message he had shared. In that moment, there was a deep connection between Keanu, Ellen, and everyone watching, a reminder of the strength and vulnerability and the importance of human connection. After a few moments of silence, Ellen, still visibly emotional, turned back to Keanu, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. "Keanu, I have to tell you, what you just said really resonates with me. I've been through my own challenges, and hearing you talk about how to move forward despite everything, well, it's really hit home." Keanu looked at her with understanding in his eyes. He had spent his life trying to embrace his own struggles and find peace, and now, seeing how his words were helping others, especially Ellen, gave him a quiet sense of fulfillment. "You know, sometimes I think we get so caught up in the noise of life, success, fame, whatever it is, that we forget to stop and really feel what we're going through," Ellen continued, her eyes still misty. "You've made me realize that it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to not have all the answers, and it's okay to feel lost sometimes." Keanu nodded thoughtfully, his expression warm and supportive. "It's easy to get caught up in everything around us. But I think that's when we lose sight of what's really important, being present with ourselves and with the people around us. We don't always need to have it all figured out. Just taking the next step is enough." Ellen's voice cracked slightly as she responded. "You've really opened my eyes today, Keanu. I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way. I think this interview has become more than just a conversation, it's become a lesson in life." Keanu smiled softly, clearly moved by Ellen's heartfelt words. "It's funny," he said, "how the simplest things can be the hardest to do. Just being kind to ourselves, accepting where we are in the moment, it's a practice, and it takes time." Ellen wiped her eyes, now smiling through her tears. "I think I needed to hear that more than I realized," she said, looking out at the audience, who was equally touched by the powerful exchange between the two. "Keanu, thank you. I don't think I've ever had an interview that's made me feel this much. It's been more than just words, it's been a message of hope." As Keanu's words settled in, Ellen wiped away the last of her tears, but she couldn't hide the emotional shift that had taken place in her. The moment, so raw and genuine, had affected her in a way she hadn't expected. She tried to maintain her usual upbeat energy, but it was clear that Keanu's message had touched her deeply. She took a breath and looked directly at Keanu, her voice shaky but sincere. "Keanu, I have to say this. I've had a lot of people come through this show, but what you just said has completely changed the way I look at things. I mean, really. I've been carrying a lot with me, just like many others do, and hearing you talk about finding peace despite everything, it's like a weight's been lifted." The audience could feel the tension in the air, the deep, heartfelt connection between the two. Keanu, always the calm and grounded figure, simply nodded and smiled softly. "We all carry things, Ellen. But we don't have to carry them alone. Sometimes it's about letting go of the pressure to be perfect and just allowing ourselves to be human. As Ellen listened to Keanu, her emotions began to swell once again. She had been through her own share of challenges, struggles she hadn't openly discussed in front of the public. Keanu's words brought a sense of clarity, and before she could stop it, tears welled up in her eyes again. She smiled through the tears, but her voice cracked as she spoke. I've been hiding a lot of my own struggles, trying to stay strong for others, but listening to you today, it's like you gave me permission to feel. And to let go. The audience was silent, the gravity of the moment settling in. Ellen, usually the one in control of the conversation, was now the one receiving something profound from Keanu, his message of hope, resilience, and emotional honesty. And for the first time in a long while, she felt free to let her guard down. Keanu, who had been quietly observing Ellen's emotional response, leaned forward slightly, his gaze softening as he saw the vulnerability she was showing. Without hesitation, he offered her the comfort she needed, not just as a guest on her show, but as a fellow human being. You know, Ellen, he said in his steady, calm voice, it's okay to feel. You don't have to carry everything on your own. I think the hardest part is allowing yourself to be open to the feelings that we often try to push down. But you're right, sometimes you just need permission to feel and to let go. And it's okay to have moments where you're not on all the time. Ellen looked up at Keanu, her eyes full of gratitude, her voice now more composed but still tinged with emotion. You make it sound so simple. But you're right. It's just so hard sometimes. Keanu smiled, his expression gentle. It's not about making it simple, but about understanding that we're all learning as we go. None of us have it all figured out. But when you can be honest with yourself, that's when the real healing starts. Ellen took a moment to reflect on his words. Her shoulders, once tense with the weight of public expectations, now seemed a little lighter. Keanu's words had given her permission not only to acknowledge her struggles but to let herself move forward from them. She took a deep breath, finally breaking the quiet pause. Thank you, Keanu, she said, her voice full of emotion. This interview wasn't what I expected at all. It wasn't just an interview. It was a lesson, for me and for everyone watching. You've given me something to think about, something to live by. Keanu gave her a soft nod. I'm glad it helped, Ellen. Sometimes, it's just about taking things one day at a time, finding peace in the little moments, and not being afraid to lean on others when you need to. Ellen smiled, wiping away one last tear. The audience, who had been silent throughout the emotional exchange, now erupted in applause, not just for Keanu's words, but for the powerful moment of connection they had witnessed. As the applause began to fade, the emotional weight of the conversation lingered in the air. The audience, deeply moved by Keanu's calm wisdom and Ellen's openness, sat in reflection, many still wiping away tears. The mood in the studio was completely different from when the show had started. What began as a light-hearted interview had turned into an intimate and profound exchange that resonated deeply with everyone present. Ellen, still visibly touched, turned toward the camera, addressing the viewers at home. I think we all needed to hear that today, she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. We all carry something, and sometimes, we just need to hear that it's okay to feel. That we don't have to have everything figured out all the time. And Keanu, you've given us all a little more peace today. Thank you. Keanu, who had been quietly watching the emotional aftermath, gave a small smile. Thank you, Ellen. It's all about connecting, sharing, and being open to the truth in front of us. We're all just figuring it out. Ellen turned back to Keanu, her voice now more playful, though still warm. Well, Keanu, you've done it again. You've made me cry, and you've made me think about life in a whole new way. I'm just glad we had this moment together. Keanu chuckled softly. I didn't mean to make you cry, but I'm glad it made a difference. As the show came to a close, Ellen stood up and walked over to Keanu, giving him another warm hug. The audience, once again on their feet, applauded the powerful exchange that had unfolded before them. It was clear that this episode would be remembered for years to come, not just for the celebrity guests but for the lesson about vulnerability, resilience, and the importance of taking a moment to connect with one another. As Keanu exited the stage, the emotional energy in the studio didn't dissipate immediately. Ellen, wiping the last of her tears, sat down behind her desk, still processing the profound exchange she had just experienced. Her eyes were reflective, and for a moment she sat in silence, looking out at the audience, as if taking in everything that had just unfolded. "I'm sure we all feel a little lighter now," she said, her voice still carrying the raw emotion from the conversation. "Keanu's message is one we all needed to hear. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to be real with ourselves and others. To admit that we don't have all the answers, and that's okay." The audience, still visibly affected, nodded in agreement. They knew this wasn't just another celebrity interview. It was a life lesson wrapped in the form of a conversation. The power of Keanu's vulnerability had left an indelible mark on everyone in the room, and for many, it was a moment of introspection. Ellen turned to the camera. "I hope you all at home are feeling what we're feeling here. Life isn't about being perfect, it's about embracing the imperfect moments and learning from them. Keanu Reeves has reminded us that it's okay to feel, to struggle, and to still find peace in the midst of it all." The studio lights dimmed slightly as the camera zoomed in on Ellen. "We're all in this together," she said quietly, her voice full of hope. "Thank you, Keanu, for giving us that reminder tonight. You've given us all the permission to let go and just be human."